Hello, welcome to another edition of Oklahoma Politics and You. I'm your host, Steve Byas, and this evening we will have as our guest Charlie Meadows. In the Constitution of the United States, the Founding Fathers, and the First Amendment to the Constitution, adopted in 1791, many Americans are familiar with many of the things that are in the First Amendment, discussion of freedom of speech and freedom of the press and freedom of religion. I think sometimes one of the parts of the First Amendment that may not be as talked as much about is the part where it says Congress shall make no law restricting the right of the people to petition the government for a redress of their grievances. And an organization here in the state of Oklahoma that is very important in doing just that is the Oklahoma Conservative Political Action Committee. And tonight our guest is the chairman of OCPAC, Charlie Meadows. Charlie, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Steve. It's really great to be back with you again. I think I've been here a couple of times before, once actually filling in for you.
Filling in for me. I was watching an OU-OSU basketball game that night.
And you actually cut for that reason. So
it's one time I've missed in 10 years. So
it's not bad.
Okay. Well, let's talk a little bit about yourself for just a second. You're a small businessman here in Oklahoma. You're chairman of OCPAC, and kind of first off, tell me before we get into the organization, how did you get involved and interested in public affairs?
It's really pretty interesting. As a young boy growing up, always from kind of a distance observed these things. Lived in California when Ronald Reagan was governor. Got a little upset with him a time or two, but I don't think I was even a voter out there. I moved back to Oklahoma in 1973, Steve, and had a very, very powerful Christian conversion experience. And I began to immerse myself in the Word of God and study and read many books and things like that. I actually had the attitude that Christians should involve all their efforts and time in building the kingdom of God. You let these kingdoms of the world go where they're going to go anyway. Mm-hmm. And I actually was pretty effective at urging Christians not to be involved in government, politics, or public affairs.
Oh, yeah.
And I began to listen to a radio program called Point of View, founded by Marlon Maddox out of Dallas, Texas. And I began to listen, and I realized that there was a culture war going on. So one night, a couple of guests he had on his program were going to be in Oklahoma City. My wife and I and another couple went down to here. This gentleman was the immediately retired superintendent of the social studies department of the Baltimore, Maryland School District. Been in education for 30 years. And he had realized he had been a part of remaking America into something very different than the ideas of our founding fathers. And that night, as I observed him, he went through a stack of books almost as tall as this table, reading quotes from humanists, secularists, and people that were either Christ haters or actually American haters. And it was just like a light turned on, and God kind of spanked my hands that night and let me realize that politics and the arena of public affairs is just another arena of spiritual warfare. And I began to be drawn to that, and once I started going that way, there was no holding me back, I guess. I think I'm called to this particular arena to try to understand the ideas of our founding fathers and promote those among our neighbors, friends, family, and such as that.
Well, I think if you read the Bible, that you see that God held the people of ancient Israel responsible for their government, and they couldn't even vote for, certainly we're responsible when we have the opportunity to vote and to petition our government and all those sort of things that are available. So let's talk now about the Oklahoma Conservative Political Action Committee. What's the genesis of that? How did that come about?
Approximately 16 years ago, another man and I began to meet for lunch as he was planning on running for the state chairman of the Republican Party. And every Wednesday, we would get together, ask me to be his campaign manager, and invariably our time would break down in discussion of issues and just fellowship. And we always enjoyed our time together. And one day I suggested that we invite a few other people to come, and he thought that was a good idea. So the next Wednesday was 3, and then 4, and that thing just kept growing. And we got up to 10 to 12 coming very regularly on a Wednesday, and kind of broke down into, or became what I would call a debating society. And we went on like that for several years. We'd get together, we'd distribute or change materials back and forth to read, we'd discuss things, we'd take positions, we'd learn to defend those positions, we'd learn to challenge someone else without being, you know, unpleasant or something to that nature. And we just kept growing. And pretty soon after you get to about 16 to 18 people, I don't care how long your table is, you started breaking down into smaller little subgroups. You couldn't have one discussion at the table. So we began to move more toward a speaker format. And we went several years, probably 8 years, as a kind of a debating society. And they have a lot of fun, but they never accomplish anything. So 7.5, 8 years ago, I proposed to everyone that we actually ought to form an organization with a purpose in mind and try to accomplish something rather than just have a lot of fun. Now, I don't want to ever lose the flavor of that debating society, so we still have some of that at our meetings.
Yeah.
But that's how I got involved with OCPAC.
Okay, very good. And so what is the primary goal of OCPAC?
What we saw on the horizon was the fact that term limits would kick in. I believe it was 2004 in its first year, actually 2002 for the Senate, 2004 in the House, and everyone by that year would be in. We saw a spattering of what I would call truly conservative, limited government Republicans. And we thought, if we form an organization, a PAC, raise some money, and help elect more conservative Republicans, maybe conservatives would actually become a majority, primarily in the House caucus. And so we thought in 3 election cycles, maybe we could obtain that conservative majority. What was kind of interesting is we've probably actually had more impact on the Senate than we have on the House.
Yeah.
And but that was the objective, is to try to really locate and find truly conservative constitutionalists and help elect them to the state legislature. That was the original purpose.
And so you think you have made some progress in that regard?
Yeah, obviously you and your partner Ron McWhorter publish the Oklahoma Constitution newspaper, and the summer issue every year has the conservative index in it. And so I think it's the finest thing in the state, probably the only thing in the state, that ranks our entire state legislature on a conservative and a liberal basis. When you take the members, you take the lawmakers that we have supported and watch how they govern, see what their scores are on that index, you're going to find their average score will probably be 15 or 20 points higher than the average of the rest of the Republicans that we did not select.
Okay.
So I think we've found a key to find the good guys and really help them get elected.
Okay. So what's the secondary goal then?
Well, and let me throw out one other thing.
Okay.
We've existed now for 4 election cycles, which cover 6 years. And in that period of time, we've actually contributed to 56 candidates, and 28 of them have been elected to the state legislature. So we're right at 50%. And you know, it's an interesting thing. We don't just put our money and our efforts behind who we think can win. We're truly looking for the best. So that's our primary goal. Secondarily, I think, and this developed as time went on, we actually decided, you know, there needs to be some accountability. We find these Republicans, you can go listen to them at their campaign speeches, you can read their literature, they basically all say the same thing. I'm a conservative, I believe in limited government, smaller government, things like that. And yet we noticed when some of them get elected, they almost govern more like a liberal Democrat than a conservative Republican. So a few years ago, we started what was called the Rhino program.
Okay.
And we basically take the scores out of your newspaper. We've kind of drawn a line in the sand of about 60, a little variation in that. And we're not asking for ideological purity, but at about 60, and we suggest that if in a 2-year average, your score is not above a 60, actually it's 57 in the House, 61 in the Senate, you're going to automatically be nominated for the Rhino Award. Okay. And then our members actually vote to distribute one person, or to name one person as the rhino in the Senate and the rhino in the House.
Tell our viewers what a rhino is.
Well, it stands for Republican in name only. I'd like to show, if we can get a close-up of this, okay. I'd like to show people what a rhino looks like, because it's interesting, Steve. Most people think it's that animal that lives in Africa or India with the snoot on it.
Yeah.
That's really not true. What a rhino is a donkey with elephant ears glued, kind of stuck over the donkey ears, and it has this long snoot down here that's been kind of taped on the end of the donkey thing.
Yeah.
So that's what a rhino actually is. And so we actually have the rhino nominee list, and then we give an award to one senator. It's a very dubious award, and it's gotten to where they really would prefer not to have that. We've taken it a step further, though, and that is anyone who's nominated for the rhino list, if they draw a Republican opponent in the primary, we invite that Republican candidate to our meetings. If that candidate is a conservative, then we actually support that candidate and try to take that liberal Republican out of the state legislature and replace him with a really good one.
Okay, that's very good. You know, you know, you think about what the situation would be if there were no accountability, no ratings, nothing like that. You know, people could go back to their districts and say, I'm voting conservative up there. And I guess prior to there was a group that had an index 2 years prior, 4 years, I think, prior to the Oklahoma Constitution Index, for example. And at the national level, I think, you know, the American Conservative Union started doing some ratings, and, you know, New American does the ratings and everything. But back in the old days, you know, people could just, I'm a conservative. I've heard the story, I don't know if it's true, that Frank Church, senator, was an author of the Gun Control Act, and actually told people at a public forum in his home state that he was opposed to gun control. Yeah. And
well,
people believed him.
This actually happened last year. The winner of last year's Rhino Award in the House was Lee Denny from Cushing.
Yeah.
She scored a 33, and I believe of the 44 Democrats in the House, I think about 36 of them either tied her or scored higher than she did. She drew a very conservative Republican. We supported that Republican. We weren't able to take Lee out. But I think it'll be interesting to see. I bet you're going to see her score 20 to 30 points higher on the conservative index. I've heard rumors she really did not enjoy that Republican primary and is really hoping that she doesn't draw another opponent this year. But I'm going to tell you, if I have no beef with her, this is not personal. If she will govern like a conservative, we'll leave her alone. We might even support her someday if she really gets her score up there. But if she's going to govern like a liberal Democrat, then she becomes a target of a group that wants to hold Republicans accountable.
What would you say to people that say that OCPAC, even though it's nonpartisan, is simply a front for the Republican Party?
Well, we're not exactly nonpartisan. Our bylaws only allow us to support Republicans.
Okay.
But I think they miss the point if they think we're only a front for the Republican Party. If we were, we would never go after a liberal Republican. We would never criticize Republicans. That's what Republican front groups are. And believe me, we've caught plenty of, shall we say, press and attention. And, you know, it's a love-hate relationship, Steve. They love the money we put in the races. We put almost $70,000 in the last 4 election cycles. They love it that our members go out and knock doors and help, and a variety of things like that. But they don't like being held accountable. And if somebody doesn't do it, there's nothing to keep them from going along and getting along with liberalism more and more.
Yeah. Well, you know, and the flip side of that is I've heard people say, well, what do you guys want? What does this OCPAC want? Do they want to see Democrats win? I mean, do they want to, they're too tough on Republicans, you know, and you've heard that argument. So that's the flip side of it. What would you say to them?
Well, I will tell you what one Republican senator said one time. And he really didn't appreciate some of what we're doing, just like what you're describing there. But he told one of our members, didn't even know he's one of our members. We have so many people spread across the state. It's almost nothing goes on that we don't eventually find out about. And he said to this individual, but if they weren't there, they're our anchor, and if they weren't there to try to hold us on course, there's no telling where we would be. So yes, when it's kind of like a cockroach when they get light on, they want to run, they don't like the light and everything. And I understand that they don't like it, but it's not a personal thing. It's an attempt to hold them accountable. And that's what it really is. We're not wanting Democrats necessarily to win over Republicans. But in some cases, like Lee Denny, when you have a majority of Democrats that score higher than she does, and you have such a large majority, 57-44 in the House, you could afford to give up one or two if it actually shook up the rest of them to let them realize, hey, this group out here is serious.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly right. Kind of tell me, what is the structure of OCPAC? How is it governed? I mean,
well, many people will tell you it's kind of a benevolent dictator.
Yeah.
And the truth and reality is we have a chairman, we have a vice chairman, we have a secretary, we have a treasurer, we have a general counsel. Those are the officers in OCPAC. And we have always tried to have our meetings. And by the way, we've missed one Wednesday in the last 16 years. We try to always have our meetings interesting, fast-moving, and not to break down and bore down into legal squabblings over the rules and everything. So the organization really is set up to have a lot of authority and power in the chairmanship. We have election every 2 years, and at some point in time, if the members feel that I'm not doing proper or too overbearing or something of that nature, they throw me out and I'll put some other dictator in.
Can't imagine such a thing.
But it is a top-down organization as far as its governance is concerned.
Now, one thing that you were talking to me a little bit about today, I went to the meeting today, and that you're looking to have a speakers group, and I found that kind of an intriguing thing. What is it that you're planning to do there?
Well, I think there's three purposes for OCPAC. One is to find these good Republicans, put them in office. Two is to hold them accountable. And the third one is to try to cause general citizens to think about issues, to try to understand what principles make government work well versus those that do not work well for government. And so we are in process right now of creating a Speakers Bureau. And what we want to do is probably have 10, maybe 12 really high-quality PowerPoint presentations, another 8 or 10 members that have very good communication skills that can be presenters. And what we want to do is create a nice pamphlet, some information, send that out to all types of civic clubs, because many political civic clubs or whatever, not every speech, not every presentation will be a political presentation. Some are just going to be important information. But we want to try to go out and encourage even more Oklahomans to actually think, not just take the pabum of one party or the other, or the pabum of a political figure, but we want them to think and to build a standard within their own mind and understanding of what good government is and what bad government is, so they can make those distinctions at the polls. And we want to try to do that. Like I say, we'll develop several speeches. Some probably be on education, I think Social Security reform, basic economics, a variety of things. The fair tax, maybe we have immigration, that issue. We'll develop a variety of these and then make those available to people. And we don't intend to charge. We'll stay in central Oklahoma initially. We may branch out beyond that. We'll just see how it goes. But I think we're probably at least 3 months away of really having several of our really high-quality PowerPoint presentations put together at this point in time.
That sounds like an ambitious and hopefully effective plan.
Yep.
Okay, today I was just going to get your thought on something here. I was glancing in the paper, saw that a legislator, and his name escapes me, but I will get it down before the next paper comes out probably, was suggesting that pharmaceutical reps should register as lobbyists with the State Ethics Commission because they lobby doctors. Now, talk a little bit about, in the framework of people's misunderstanding of the role of government, what problem do you have with having pharmaceutical reps register with the State Ethics Commission because they lobby doctors?
Well, I would suggest that they don't lobby doctors. I would suggest that they communicate with doctors to try to sell their product to them. And doctors will evaluate that. It's a competitive business. Big Pharmacia is a competitive business, and to suggest that they are lobbying doctors is the same thing as lobbying government is absolutely ludicrous in my estimation.
You see, the thought process, though, I mean, is that it's almost like we already have socialized medicine, and that would make sense, I guess, if we had gone to socialized, we were in full-fledged socialized medicine. I guess a doctor would be working for the government, and
I don't know what percentage of socialization we have in our medical community right now, but it's too much. That's one of the reasons that the cost of it is so high. And of course, on a national scheme, all of the Democrat candidates for president are pushing for universal, single-payer, full-blown socialized medicine, however you want to call it. And it would be the worst mistake that we could make in the United States of America, in my opinion.
Yeah, it would be. Well, how do you kind of tell me a little bit about what changes in direction for state government would a typical OCPAC member see as necessary to improve Oklahoma?
I think that's a great question, Steve. And one of the things that we have found over the last 4 election cycles, we have easily interviewed well over 100 Republican candidates for the state legislature. Now, our interview process kind of works like this. We have a questionnaire with 10 questions on it. We're not going to ask you how you would vote on a particular bill. All of these questions are philosophical in nature. Some will do with the economy, some will do with moral and social issues, taxation, a variety of things like that. And what we have found is that we have seen 15, maybe 20 at the most, candidates who really have a conservative ideology well developed and are ready to step into place and be a good lawmaker. We've seen 15, maybe 20 that have a conservative ideology halfway developed. So maybe I'm talking at most 40 out of over 100. The rest of them, they don't have a clue. There's a variety of reasons they're running. It might be their own personal ego. Most of the time it's because they're politically attractive and somebody's come to them, somebody from the party, and has approached them to run because they need numbers in office. But what we have found is you've got to understand what our problems are. You have to understand what needs to be done to fix those problems, and you have a strategy of how to get there. Right to work was one issue. Another one is tort reform. You've got to understand what the problem is. You have to understand how to fix it. Another one is our taxing structure. In Oklahoma, we tax the productive side of our economy way too much. If you want to see an environment for explosive economic growth that is fair, not central planned, not fascism, but I'm talking about a private market, free enterprise, private type market, then we have got to stop taxing and penalizing the productive side of our economy. I'm talking business taxes, I'm talking corporate taxes, capital gains taxes, personal income taxes. Government needs to get what it gets off of the consumptive side of our economy. So understanding that and how we move from where we are today to another way needs to be strategically thought out by at least conservatives within the Republican Party in both the Senate and the House, and hopefully governor. So we try to be an asset to lawmakers that are sitting in office already. And it's a kind of amazing thing. I get calls from 15, 20 lawmakers, sometimes once or twice a week, asking what would be a conservative position on this, conservative perspective, helping them walk it through.
Okay. Well, I certainly appreciate you coming on the program this evening.
It's great being here.
Okay. Well, thank you for being with us this evening, and please join us next time for another edition of Oklahoma Politics and You.